So Paul has finished responding now to the matters that cause division, and he responded to those in the first 4 chapters. Then he identified the gross sexual immorality, incest, in chapter 5, and then in chapter 6 he started talking about lawsuits among believers. Now he comes to the actual questions that the church have raised with him when he begins, and you see this at several points. Now concerning the matters about which you wrote. We see this again in verse 25 of chapter 7. We see it at the beginning of chapter 8. We see it at the beginning of chapter 12 and in several other places. We'll come to those as well. So now about the matters which you wrote in chapter 7. Then in quotes, now Paul is now raising their question really. It is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. The Corinthian question was, is it? Can we? What's the Christian ethic around sexual relations, male, female, man and woman, and marriage and coming together? If you have a high view of the body, you respect it. If you only think that the material world is here and that's all there is no sense of eternity or God or future, then you will diminish your body and live how you like, which is precisely what the Corinthians were doing. So Paul addresses their conduct in marriage. He talks about sexual relations between husband and wife. He addresses the unmarried and the widowed and calling, and those that if you can't hold back your urges, then get married. But Paul argues, but I wish that you were like I am, and that you could devote yourself wholeheartedly to the Lord. For if you have a husband or a wife, then you will have more concerns, more anxiety, more worry to concern yourself within this life. It's not to diminish marriage, but he's saying that there is a place for calling, a place for singleness, and a place for celibacy that has a special place, I think, in the calling and the ministry and the purposes of God. So this is their first question. Husbands are bound to their wife, and wives are bound to their husband. This is about honouring. It is about love. It is a robust, healthy, beautiful theology of the body. We are made and built for God, and he knows it. So, verse 10, Paul gives his instruction. He says, well, not I, he says, but the Lord. This is what God's will is. And then in verse 12, I love it. He says, well, this is my opinion. This is I, myself now, not the Lord, but I will give this instruction. And then he addresses the issue of couples where one partner is a Christian, the other one isn't. I love what he says about children in verse 14. Look at what he says. Children, even with one partner, with one parent a Christian, one parent not, what's the significance? What's the meaning? What's their status if they are children in this scenario? And Paul just says, just quite bluntly, they're holy. The children are holy. This is such a beautiful way to talk about children. A high view of family, indeed, which is exactly what we need in this day and age, isn't it? Where the family are under attack in so many different ways. Verse 17, he says, lead your life as God assigns. You are a slave of Christ. You were bought with a price. Right at the heart of this really long chapter, Paul brings in the redemptive, purchased nature of the atoning work of Christ. He is the center of all of this, of marriage, the meaning of marriage, the purpose of marriage, the nature of children, the nature of calling, singleness, widowed, whatever it might be. We've been bought with a price, and that price is nothing less than the atoning sacrifice of Christ on the cross. This is chapter 7.